dance for you, 'cause there's a spark in you. You just gotta ignite the light and let it shine. Just on the night, like the 4th of July, 'cause baby you're a fire.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Connie Pfeiffer.
Welcome everyone to our 10th annual ASCO Advocacy Forum. This one looks a little different. We would have loved to be meeting face-to-face in Chicago as we do every year, but since that's not possible this year, we are very happy to be able to continue our tradition in a virtual manner. We hope you will explore the materials that we have available on the portal, and we hope you find today's presentation to be inspiring. Before we get started, I do want to share with you some sad news. We recently learned that Val Guild, co-founder and president of AIM at Melanoma, has passed away. This is a huge loss to the advocacy community, as well as oncology as a whole. Those of us at BMS who had the pleasure of working with Val will miss her dedication, knowledge, drive, and tenacity. We send our condolences to her family, colleagues, and friends. I would now like to introduce Adam Lenkowski, Senior Vice President, General Manager, and Head, U.S. Oncology, Immunology, and Cardiovascular at BMS, and Winslow Tucker, Senior Vice President, General Manager, Hematology at BMS, who will say a few words. Adam?
Thank you, Connie. And thank you all for joining us today for our 2020 ASCO Advocacy Forum. I'm Adam Lenkowski, Senior Vice President and General Manager for our U.S. Cardiovascular, Immunology, and Oncology business at Bristol Squibb. And it's great to connect with everyone again, though in a very different forum than we have had over the past 10 years hosting the BMS Advocacy Forum.
And I'm Winslow Tucker, Senior Vice President and General Manager for U.S. Hematology at Bristol Squibb. We'd like to begin today by acknowledging the personal impact and loss that so many have experienced in recent months. Please join Adam and I for a moment of silence.
Thank you. We're honored to be here with you for this virtual forum, although like many of you, I wish we were together live in Chicago, and I truly look forward to that next year. Our thoughts are with all of you as we adapt to the challenge of staying physically and mentally well in this unprecedented time.
COVID-19 has impacted the way we all work and live, and we are adapting to this new normal. However, we know that cancer patients are even more challenged by this global pandemic. While we've faced many challenges, this experience has taught us to be resilient, and we're even more focused than ever on our mission of helping patients. And our partnership is even more important than ever.
Well, this is our 10th annual Advocacy Forum for BMS. It's so exciting because it's the first time that we're at ASCO as our new combined company. Our singular vision is to transform patients' lives through science. And we cannot accomplish that mission on our own. And that's why our collaboration and partnership we have with so many of you matters so much. We share with you the goal of leaving no patient behind. You may have noticed our new symbol, the hand. It's a simple, universal expression of healing, of giving and receiving care. It's a representation of humanity, of the personal touch we bring to our work and to every treatment we pioneer. And it embodies our vision and embraces our commitment to compassionate science and putting patients and people first. We are deeply committed to the cancer community and to advocacy for our patients.
I want to express how profoundly grateful Adam and I are for your partnership and collaboration. Advocacy is such a critically important part of the work we do and the ways that we engage with patients and their caregivers. At Bristol Squibb, we are committed to global advocacy and advocacy stakeholder engagements in the following ways: to maximize patient access and promoting a strong climate of biopharmaceutical innovation. Also, to inform organizations and leaders like yourselves about the value of our medicines while also seeking your input that informs company positions, visions, and execution.
Your advocacy allows us to support a better patient and caregiver experience. It helps to foster better health outcomes and enables better access to therapy. And by engaging with your organizations, you help us illuminate unmet needs and what patients are experiencing on their individual cancer journeys.
And our strategic alliances and collaboration initiatives help to drive improved access environments and sustainability of healthcare. And I cannot understate how inspired and motivated our internal teams and colleagues are when they hear your stories and those of our patients. We are thankful for your contributions and collaboration in these various areas.
This year, we have a number of advocacy initiatives underway to deliver on these goals, including strategic coalitions that develop impactful resources for the advocacy community through peer-reviewed publications, data generation, and advocacy activities in action case study collection. Our patient expert engagement resource, known as PEER, it's a program that's designed to amplify and embed the patient voice consistently through our BMS enterprise. And globally, we share best practices, create efficiencies, and leverage expertise through various meetings, forums, trainings, digital platforms, and more to align on advocacy programming.
And by continuing to infuse the patient advocate voice and perspectives in the discovery, development, and delivery of innovative medicines, we're able to affect change and make a difference in patients' lives. For that reason, we are committed to continue to listen to your insights and to infuse the patient voice at every opportunity. Without your partnership, we could not impact the lives of patients as meaningfully as we do. So thank you for your support and the work you do every day on behalf of the patient community.
We all know that cancer and other diseases haven't stopped their march in face of this pandemic, and our scientists are part of biopharma's unparalleled quest to respond with treatments and vaccines, and our researchers haven't stopped working.
We refuse to allow COVID-19 to sideline the progress being made in growing the ranks of cancer survivors. And we've been in ongoing communication with the global patient advocacy community across disease areas to understand how they're being impacted by this current crisis and what resources they most need in order to continue to fulfill their missions.
To date, Bristol Myers Squibb and the Bristol Myers Squibb Foundation have contributed more than $22 million to relief efforts. We're focusing on areas of the highest unmet needs, including addressing medical supply shortages and supporting continued care of our most vulnerable communities. The BMS Foundation has contributed to relief and efforts in more than 40 countries across 5 continents, and BMS is engaging with more than 250 patient and professional organizations to support research, education, patient psychosocial support, and basic human needs.
So notable examples include a $7 million grant from the Bristol Myers Squibb Foundation to Team Rubicon's and Patient Advocacy Foundation's COVID-19 Emergency Food Assistance Program. This program is providing assistance to immunocompromised patients living with cancer, multiple sclerosis, and rheumatoid arthritis patients whose ability to access or afford food and other nutritional needs is at risk due to COVID-19. Additionally, Bristol Myers Squibb is partnering with Grit Health to develop COVID Advocacy Exchange. It's a virtual platform to unite patient advocacy organizations, patients, policymakers, healthcare practitioners, and the industry in an exchange of information. This new, entirely virtual platform will convene advocacy groups to share their stories, facilitate resource sharing with each other and with patients and affiliates, and allow for increased collaboration both now and over the long term. With the COVID Advocacy Exchange, we will go where advocates want to go in terms of content, frequency, and co-creation. We're not looking for a one-way conversation with advocates. We are looking to offer a place where advocates can get answers and we can learn from them since they are now in a COVID-19 world.
And one last example I'll share. Bristol Myers Squibb expanded its existing patient support programs to help eligible unemployed patients in the U.S. who have lost their health insurance due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The expanded program, it offers access to many of Bristol Myers Squibb's medicines for free, including some of the company's most widely prescribed oncology and hematology products, as well as those prescribed via telehealth services. We will continue to do all we can to help during this pandemic to support our patients and our communities, because we believe that together we'll get through this with strength, resolve, and resiliency.
Now, in a few moments, you're going to hear from a powerful speaker named Andy Goodman, who is going to share with you how telling stories in this new normal can change the world that we live in. I'm personally excited to hear his presentation, as it's a topic that can improve on our basic human interactions and help connect people to purpose. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to the days when we will physically be able to join in person again. Until then, stay healthy, safe, and continue to let us know how we can support your work. Now, back to you, Connie.
Thank you, Winslow and Adam. And now it is my pleasure to be able to introduce our speaker for today. Andy Goodman is co-founder and director of the Goodman Center, which teaches communications and marketing professionals how to reach more people with more impact. Along with storytelling as best practice, he is author of Why Bad Ads Happen to Good Causes and Why Bad Presentations Happen to Good Causes. He also publishes a monthly journal, Free Range Thinking, to share best practices in the field of public interest communications. Andy is internationally known for his speeches and workshops on storytelling and has led over 500 trainings for clients. It's my pleasure to introduce Andy Goodman.
Thank you, Connie, and good afternoon from Los Angeles, and welcome to Telling Our Stories Now. I appreciate this opportunity to talk to you about the importance of storytelling. And if you're wondering what qualifies me to teach about storytelling, Connie gave you some of the items from my resume, but the most important item from my CV is this. I was educated at the Walt Disney Jim Henson School of Storytelling. And if you're thinking to yourself, gosh, I didn't know there was a Walt Disney Jim Henson School of Storytelling. Well, you're right, there isn't. I just made that up. Grabbed that picture from the internet. I think that's from Duke University. But I'm not lying to you, because back in the early 1990s, there was a television show on the ABC TV network on Friday nights that was a Walt Disney Jim Henson co-production. And I was a writer on that show for 3 seasons. So I can tell you from personal experience, if you want to learn a thing or two about telling stories, you could do worse than to work for the Walt Disney and Jim Henson people. And if you're wondering, well, what show was that? Maybe I saw it. Well, I'm assuming this is a group of intelligent, caring adults, so maybe not. But just for the record, it was a show on Friday nights on ABC called Dinosaurs. Anybody remember this show? I hope there's some fans out there. I'll tell you a funny thing about this show. I was one of 8 writers on this show, and we, the writers, thought we were writing this witty, trenchant social satire using dinosaurs to mock human foibles. But 20 years later, when I meet people who remember the show, it seems like the only thing they remember, and I mean the only thing, is this.
Want to give Daddy your keys?
Not the mama, not the mama, not the mama, not the mama, not the mama.
That is starting to bother me.
Like I said, witty, trenchant social satire. But I spent 3 seasons there, learned an awful lot about storytelling. And then I actually got out of the TV business and had a chance to work at a nonprofit started by Norman Lear and some of his friends in Hollywood called the Environmental Media Association, or EMMA. And the whole idea behind EMMA was to be the nexus, the connecting point between the environmental community, with all the important messages it had to get out, and the entertainment industry, with its huge megaphone for getting out messages. And specifically what we did at EMMA, we worked with writers and producers of TV shows and movies, trying to convince them to put environmental messages into their storylines. So the idea is you're sitting at home watching your favorite primetime show, minding your own business, And all of a sudden, the characters are talking about recycling or global warming or what have you. So I ran that organization for 5 years. And in that time, I met lots of people kind of like you, people at nonprofits, foundations, government agencies, people working to make the world a better place. And as I would meet people at conferences and workshops, and when we all used to get together in one place, remember that? Well, when I meet people like that, and I would introduce myself and say, "Hi, I'm Andy. I'm from Emma. This is what I do. What do you do?" I would often find that out of their mouths would come the mission statements and the bullet points and the acronyms and just the blah, blah, blah. And after 30 or 40 seconds of listening, I would think to myself, I have no idea what you do for a living. Please stop talking. So in 1998, 22 years ago this month, I started my own firm called the Goodman Center with the express purpose of helping people like you communicate more clearly with the audiences you need to reach, primarily through storytelling. And over the years, we've done over 500 workshops for nonprofits like these, government agencies and foundations like those. We also work with colleges and universities and some corporate clients as well. This is just a sampling of the organizations we work with. We've also been lucky enough to work all over the world. We worked with CARE in Guatemala, upper left-hand corner, that's First Nation tribes in British Columbia, helped them fight an oil pipeline. Down there where it says ALU towards the bottom, that's the African Leadership University in Mauritius. And what this has taught us is that no matter where you go, no matter how different people are, there are certain universal truths when it comes to storytelling. There are certain rules to follow if you want to tell a persuasive and memorable story. So here's what we're going to do today in a very fast 45 minutes or so. I want to answer 3 questions. One is, why is storytelling so powerful? I believe it's the single most powerful communications tool you have available to you, bar none. And I want to make that case to you today. Second, how do you tell a good story? There are certain questions you need to answer in the audience's mind for it to be a good, successful story. So what are those questions? How do you answer them? And what kinds of stories should you tell? That's really what this is all about. Getting out there in the world, what kinds of stories should you be telling to power up your work with storytelling? And here's what we're going to do. Those are the 3 sections of my talk today. At the end of each section, we're going to stop. And I'm going to call Connie back in and ask her if there are any questions in the chat box. So if you have a question anywhere along the way about why it's powerful, how to tell a good story, what kinds of stories, go ahead and put it in the chat box. And then Connie's going to relay your questions to me. So we'll stop 3 times, even before the end, because I don't want anybody lingering with a question. Okay? So that's what we're going to do. So why is storytelling so powerful? Here's the first argument. Stories help us remember. And just stop and think about this for a second. If somebody tells you something and it's, in one ear, out the other, and gone, game over, right? That piece of information has no chance to affect how you think and behave again. But if somebody can tell you something in a way that it actually sticks in your brain and stays there, then it has a chance to affect how you think and behave. And stories have that power. This was illustrated in a fascinating study done by the University of Minnesota with 5-year-olds. So I want to tell you about this study. So picture a class full of 5-year-olds. I guess it would be like pre-K or kindergarten. And one day the teacher says, "Kids, we have a very special guest visitor today from the University of Minnesota. She wants to play a fun game with you to test your memories. So please give her your full attention." And the kids gather around, and the researcher comes forward, like you see in the illustration here. And she says, "Kids, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to hold up cards that have 2 sides, 2 panels. And there's going to be pictures of 2 things, like a bar of soap on the left and a shoe on the right. And in this game, we're going to call that a pair. So soap and shoe is a pair. And I want you to remember that, okay? Can you remember soap and shoe?" And the kids are all like, "Uh-huh." So good. We're just getting started. Then she holds up a second card, again with 2 things on it. Let's say a baseball bat and a bucket of paint. She says, "I want you to remember this one too. Soap and shoe, right? And bat and paint. Can you remember that pair too?" The kids are nodding their heads, "Sure, yeah, uh-huh." Then she holds up a third card. This one has a cloud and a daisy. She says, "I want you to remember this pair as well." And the kids are starting to be like, "Uh-huh," right? And she holds up for the kids 21 cards, 21 pairs for the 5-year-olds to remember. When she's all done, she says, okay, that was an awful lot to take in. I know that. So let's take a break, go out to the playground, and go play for an hour, 60 minutes. Well, 1 hour later, she brings them back in. She says, okay, kids, that was great. Gather around again. Here comes the second half of the game. This is the really fun part. I'm going to hold up those cards again, with the 2 pictures. But this time, one of the pictures is going to be missing, and you have to tell me what's missing. So you get the scenario. 1 hour later, 21 pairs. How many can the 5-year-olds remember? How many can they reconstruct? Take a moment and think about it. What do you think? 0, 1, 5, 10, what do you think? If you have a 5-year-old or recently had a child that age in your life, what do you think? Well, in this study, 1 hour later, 21 pairs, they can remember one. 1 out of 21 usually was the first pair, soap and shoe. Because let's face it, they're 5, right? All right, we're just getting started. Our researcher now goes to another school on another day. Same 21 pairs, but this time there's a twist. This time, as she shows the students each pair, she says, I'm going to call on one of you to put the words in a sentence for the whole class to hear. So she holds up the first pair, soap and shoe, looks around the room, spots 5-year-old Connie in the front row, says, Connie, would you please put the words soap and shoe in a sentence for the whole class to hear whenever you're ready? Little Connie sits there and thinks to herself and says, the soap is in my shoe. Very good. Thank you, Connie, future novelist. She does this with each pair. The kids hear 21 sentences. Go out and play for an hour. Bring them back and test them. Compared to the first group that only was able to put back 1 pair, how do you think this group did? Same, better, worse? How about 8 out of 21 pairs remembered? All right, we're going to go to one more school, one more day, one fresh group of 5-year-olds. But this time, as she calls on each child, she says, I want you to put the words in a sentence that asks a question. So she looks around the room, 5-year-old Jason, could you please put the words soap and shoe in a sentence that asks a question? Little Jason thinks to himself for a second, says, who put the soap in my shoe? Very good. The kids hear 21 questions, go out and play for an hour, bring them back and test them. Compared to the first 2 groups, 1, 8. How do you think this group did? Same, better, worse, in between? 16 out of 21 pairs remembered. So look at these results side by side by side, and you tell me, what did the researchers conclude was happening in these kids' brains by virtue of hearing questions? It was happening not so much when they just heard a sentence, and almost not at all when they just saw the pairs. Well, think about it. What happens when you hear a question? You answer it, right? Even if the question is not asked to you directly, it's human nature to come up with an answer. By the way, this is why so much advertising asks questions. Have you ever noticed that? You're out of your house, you're driving down the road, going to the supermarket, you pass a billboard. It says, wouldn't you like to be on a beach right now? And you're like, yes, I would, right? So triggered by questions, the kids were compelled to answer. Who put the soap in my shoe? Oh, well, it must have been little Connie while I wasn't looking, that trickster. And they start to construct in their minds the rudiments of a story where somebody is doing something to somebody else and there's an outcome. So triggered by questions, there was a higher level of engagement. Their minds had to start percolating. They went out in that playground, and whether they knew it or not, they were constructing stories to answer the question. And then when they brought them back in the room and they held up the picture and it just had the soap, little Jason sat to himself and thought, soap. Oh, that's right. Connie put the soap in my shoe. Shoe! And he had the other half of the pair. And they did it 16 out of 21 times. So the takeaway from this study, this is relevant to every group I get to speak to, and really everyone today. If you have some facts about your organization that you would like people to remember, it is much more likely they'll remember those facts if they're contained within a story than if you just give them the facts. Stories help us remember. That's number one. Secondly, stories can change our minds. They can change how we think and how we behave. And take a moment to think about this. Think about your mind. Right now, inside your head, in your brain, there are literally thousands of stories about the way the world works. You see that little dot there with the smaller dots inside it? That's inside your brain. Let me blow that up for you. There you go. There's a little snapshot inside your brain. Didn't know that your brain had the Mac OS working, did you? Well, anyway, you have thousands of stories about the way the world works in your brain. And every time you encounter a new person, place, or circumstance, your brain is automatically dialing up the right story to say, how do I deal with this person, this place, this thing? And if it can find the right story, full speed ahead. And if it can't, well, then the brakes are on. Put another way, stories are like the software of our brain, telling us what to let in and what to reject. So, if you want to change how people think and behave, sometimes the first thing you have to do is to change the software, change the story that they're going to that tells them how to proceed. And this was done and done brilliantly in a campaign around the issue of organ donation. Now, in the US right now, if you have a chance to check that box on the DMV form to say, I want to be an organ donor, about 56% will, about 44% won't. The people who won't, they're not necessarily bad people or selfish people. Some people have a medical excuse and cannot. But a lot of people who won't, who say no because there's a very strong story in their head about the way the world works that says to them, organ donation is not for me. What are the stories against organ donation? What are the reasons people give why they say, I'm not doing this? Do you think you know? I bet you do. And one of the most common reasons, doctors won't work as hard to save me, right? If they know I'm an organ donor and they see me going, it's like, well, we'll let this one go. We need the kidneys. Here are the top four. Won't work as hard to save me. It's against my religious beliefs. When I get to the gates of heaven, I see St. Peter, I can't have donated my eyes. Otherwise, how am I going to see him, right? I need to be all there. I'm too old to donate. You can be as old as 80 in most cases, but some people think, no, I'm past my prime. And then my personal favorite, people think that instead of my organs going to the most deserving next person down the line, that rich and famous people will jump the line, and my liver will go to a Kardashian. God forbid. Now, look, none of these are true. Not one is true. But people believe this stuff. It's the story that they go to. And it's led to this situation. According to Donate Life America, right now in the U.S., about 120,000 people are on a waiting list for an organ transplant of some kind. The need so far exceeds the supply that, look at that number in the middle. 22 people die every day waiting for an organ that's never coming. That's 22 tragedies a day. Well, you might think, well, that data is powerful. If we went to these people and showed them these numbers, they would change their mind. You know what? No, it doesn't. You go to these people with those numbers, you know what they say? Gosh, that's a shame. That's really too bad. But doctors won't work as hard to save me. Religious beliefs, too old, Kardashian, whatever. They're sticking with their story. The only way you're going to change their mind is to give them a more powerful story, a more resonant story, something that changes the software. And this was done and done brilliantly in a campaign in Brazil, in the town in the red box, pronounced in Portuguese, Recife. Now, whether you've ever been to Recife, Brazil, or South America, or you've never been, I'll bet you still know that in Recife, in Brazil, in South America, the people are all crazy for the same thing. Just absolutely nuts for the same thing. It's like a continental religion. You know what it is? One word: football, or what we call soccer. And in Recife, the local team that people adore is called Sport Club do Recife. You see that lion with the 3 stars? That's their logo. That's everywhere in town. People love this team. People would die for this team. Well, hold on. There's a thought. If they would die for the team, would they donate their organs for the team? Believe it or not, This was the genesis of a campaign where they went to the fans of the team specifically, and they said, if you're truly a fan of this team, go all the way and sign up for an organ donor card. We'll give you a card that looks like this, look, emblazoned with the logo of the team, to prove that you're a true fan. But here's the story that they spun to really inspire people to sign up. They said, if you're a fan of this team and you sign up for this card and you agree to donate your organs, and God forbid something should happen to you, but your organs get passed on, your fandom will live on forever. You will become an immortal fan. That was the name of the campaign, Immortal Fans. And I have to tell you, you might be laughing now, you might be snickering, you might be saying, well, that's silly. This campaign was wildly successful. Wildly successful. I'm going to show you a short video momentarily that chronicles that success. But as you watch it, I want you to keep something in mind. A few years ago in Pittsburgh, they did a similar campaign called Play It Forward, where they got major sports stars from the Penguins and the Steelers and the Pirates to record commercials saying, I'm doing it, you should do it too. So basically, same idea, leveraging a sports fandom to get people to sign up. And I think over the course of a year, they got something like 1,200 to 1,400 people who had never signed up before to sign up for organ donor cards. So that's good, 1,200 to 1,400. Keep that number in mind as you watch Immortal Fans. Let's take a look.
Não tem. O resto é resto, o esporte é tudo. Primeiro Deus, segundo o esporte, terceiro a família e quarto é o trabalho.
Prometo que os seus olhos vão continuar assistindo o esporte.
Que os seus pulmões continuarão respirando pelo esporte.
Prometo que o seu coração sempre baterá pelo esporte.
Hoje a maior dificuldade que existe no processo de doação é o sim da família.
Eu sou rubro-negra até depois de morrer, irmão. Ter a alma é rubro-negra.
Ainda mais que quando eu doar meus órgãos, meu pulmão for pro cara do Náutico, torcedor do Náutico, ele vai respirar o esporte.
A campanha atingiu números impressionantes. 51 mil torcedores se declararam doadores, uma quantidade superior à capacidade da Ilha do Retiro.
A campanha do esporte, eu não tenho dúvida alguma que serviu para que, aumentando a oferta de doadores, a gente conseguisse zerar essa lista, conseguisse realizar realmente transplante em todos que estavam precisando.
Uma campanha de doação de órgãos lançada pelo esporte está ajudando a salvar a vida de muitos torcedores.
Antes do vídeo, eu tinha passado 18 anos de diabético e 5 anos fazendo hemodiálise. E a vida só está melhorando, minha visão está voltando aos pouquinhos. Eu renasci de novo.
Ligou para mim e disse, olha, a gente tem um provável coração para sua mãe. Você pode trazer ela? Eu disse, com certeza. Fiquei aliviado de saber que eu ainda iria poder ter ela.
Esporte, vamos aí, torcida do esporte, vamos doar. Vamos tomar essa corrente, né? Vamos parar.
There you go. Wasn't that impressive? 51,000 people signed up for the card, the number well north of 60,000 now. And even better, sport clubs in Paris and Barcelona contacted them and said, how do we do that here? So this very clever idea is radiating around the globe. But don't lose the larger point, because I'm not here today to talk to you about soccer or organ donation. I'm talking about how people's minds work. And the point I want to make is echoed in this book, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. If you've never read it, I highly recommend it. It's a real window into how people think and behave. Kahneman is actually a psychologist by trade, but he won the Nobel Prize in economics for this work. And I think to my mind, the most important thing he says in the book is this: no one ever made a decision because of a number. They need a story. And please read this closely, because what he is not saying, and what I am not saying, is I'm not saying the numbers don't matter, that you don't need the hard data or the sound science. You absolutely do. But if you're in the business of changing how people think and behave, it starts by giving them a story where they nod their heads and go, yes, that is the way the world works. And it's backed by data that says, and I have more than one story to tell you. So stories help us remember, so it sticks. And stories can change how we think and behave, making them, I believe, the most powerful communications tool you have, bar none. So before we move on to part two, as promised, I want to call back Connie and say, Connie, any questions so far about this first issue of the power of storytelling?
We do have one. It's, can you give an example of a storytelling campaign that resulted in a behavior change in the United States?
Oh, absolutely. Probably one of the most famous examples is around the issue of capital punishment. You know, for years, there have been organizations who've been fighting the death penalty, saying that, you know, it's morally wrong, that we should not be sanctioning the killing of people under any circumstances. But it's a tough case to make, because there is a story deeply embedded in our heads that goes back thousands of years, goes back to Babylonian times. It's a story that can be expressed in 5 words: an eye for an eye, right? If you kill somebody, you deserve to die. There seems to be an inherent logic in that, right? So for many years, people who were battling to remove the death penalty were up against that very strong feeling. But in the early 1990s, an organization came along for the first time called the Innocence Project, which started to tell the stories of individuals who had been convicted of murder, sentenced to death, and executed for the crime, who were later exonerated by DNA evidence. In other words, innocent people who had gone to the electric chair or the gas chamber. And so telling those stories, the Innocence Project started to ask, you know, yes, we understand an eye for an eye, but are you okay with a system that is killing innocent people? And perhaps shouldn't we slow things down or stop entirely so we don't make mistakes that we can't correct? Now, I can't say that the death penalty is gone in all 50 states. It's not. But tremendous progress was made so that in many states it no longer exists because of a new story like this. So I think that's a very good example of stories told to change behavior and change the laws. Any other questions while I was talking, Connie, or shall we move on?
No, we can move on.
Very good. So how do you tell a good story? Well, I think the best way to learn is from example. Learn from the masters. Some might say steal from the masters. And I want to share a story with you now called Reunion. As you can see, it's a 3.5-minute video. I'll tell you up front, it's a commercial for Google. That's what it is. But it's such good storytelling that I wanted to share it with you, because there are certain questions that stories need to answer. And this story answers them all in order and beautifully. And I think also very movingly. So sit back, relax for the next 3.5 minutes, and let's enjoy Reunion.
ये मैं, ये यूसुफ, लंगोटिया यार सी मेरा। लाहौर में हमारे घर के सामने एक बड़ा बाग था। उस बाग का गेट बाबा आदम के जमाने। रोज शाम को हमने वहाँ पतंगे उड़ानी और उसके बाद जाके यूसुफ के दुकान से झझरिया चुरा के खानी।
झझरिया?
और मेरा साहब नमस्ते। नमस्ते। मेरी पोती मुंबई वाली। और बेटे क्या हाल है?
बचपन की तंग गली फिर से कूद फांदे छोटी छोटी मीठी चोरी गांठ लेके बांधे
हेलो अस्सलाम वालेकुम
फाजिल स्वीट्स
हाँ जी दादाजान दिल्ली से किसी की कॉल है
हेलो
यूसुफ अंकल
कौन
जी मैं सुमन बोल रही हूँ दिल्ली से आपके बचपन के दोस्त बलदेव जी की पोती याद है बचपन में आप दोनों झझरिया चुरा के खाते थे
बचपन की तंग गली फिर से कूद फांदे छोटी छोटी मीठी चोरी गांठ लेके बांधे एक पतंग सा उड़ता था परिंदों की तरह परिंदों की तरह परिंदों की तरह एक दौर था मन मन मोर था एक दौर था मन मन मोर था
पार्टीशन के वक्त हम रातों रात हिंदुस्तान आ गए
दादू
यूसुफ दी बड़ी याद आती है
कागजों की कश्तियों में डूबा रहता था झांकती खिड़कियों में उलझा रहता था वो भी क्या दौर था मन पे न जोर था एक दौर था मन मन मोर था एक दौर था मन मन मोर था
भैया थोड़ा जल्दी
हाँ जी कौन हैप्पी बर्थडे यारा यूसुफ ओए यूसुफ मेरे बल्लू ओए यूसुफ यार
Isn't that lovely? I hope you enjoyed that. Anybody need a Kleenex? Anybody? Anybody? Okay. Well, so the reason I showed that to you, as I said, is because that story answers all the questions that are instinctively in your mind, whether you know it or not, whenever someone comes to you and says, hey, I got a story for you. And the first question is, who's it about? You know, somebody comes up to you and says, oh, I got to tell you a great story. Whether you know it or not, that's the first question in your mind. Who's it about? Who is the person or people that I'm going to meet in this story and care about? They're going to take me into whatever world you're taking me to and take me through the experience. We need to identify with somebody, care about somebody to get into the story. And people don't identify with things or entities. You know, your organization is not what they're going to identify. They're going to identify with a person working at your organization, a person who has benefited from your work. So where's the human being that I'm going to connect to? Well, in this story, you just saw several human beings, but if there was one more than the others that you were connected to, really the first person that you saw, who would that be? Well, that would be Suman, the granddaughter. When we first meet her, she's visiting her grandfather in Delhi. She's a dutiful granddaughter, you know, having a nice day with her nice afternoon with her grandfather. It's all good, but there's no story yet. It's just a young woman meeting with her grandfather. Then something happens to kick the story into motion. He tells her something about his past, about this friend who he hasn't seen for decades, whom he misses. Suman gets an idea. I'm going to bring the old guys together. I'm going to reunite my grandfather with this guy, Yusuf, his old friend who he hasn't seen. So somebody now wants something. Now's a story in motion. Now a story's in motion. And what happens next is critical. Something has to stand in her way to make it interesting. It was simply a matter of, oh, I know where Yusuf is. I'll call him up and get him here tomorrow. That's not interesting. But he has no idea. The grandfather has no idea where Yusuf is. So she just has to take some clues, right? Stealing candy from an old gate. So where's that? And even if she finds him, you know, how does she bring him back? So she's got to locate him and then ultimately bring him from Lahore, Pakistan to India. So that's a lot of stuff standing in her way. How does she respond to all these challenges? How does she deal with all these obstacles, all these barriers? Well, hey, it's a commercial for Google, right? So she waves the magic wand called Google, and everything she needs to know, from where he is to what the weather's going to be, it's all there. And in the end, what happens and what does it mean? Well, you saw for yourself. The reunion was accomplished. The two old men are brought together. And the ultimate message, Google is awesome. Now, these 6 questions, they're not random. These are the questions any good story needs to answer. So let's look at them again a little bit more closely. Who is the story about? You know, for people to care about the story, there's got to be somebody that they identify with. And it really has to be, at the beginning, one person. Identification is a very human thing, and it's on a one-to-one basis. I identify with you. You identify with her. We connect with individuals, a single person to another single person. I don't mean single, an individual, not, they could be married. You know what I mean? Anyway, it's a one-on-one thing. We don't identify with big groups, with entities, with organizations, nonprofits, corporations, programs, initiatives. People identify with people, and they do it on a one-on-one basis. So if you want to tell a story about your organization, or even a team working within your organization, you got to start somewhere. You got to start with a person. Who is she? Where is she? When is she? What is her world in balance before the story even gets going? She's Suman. She's a granddaughter dutifully visiting her grandfather. Now we have a snapshot of who she is. And then the next important question is, what do they want? You know, because a person just standing there talking, you know, just sitting there talking to her grandfather, there's no story. But the minute he mentions that he misses his old friend, she thinks, oh, I'll bring them together. Then she has a goal. Somebody wants something. A story's in motion. Now, this might sound like a gross oversimplification, but think about it. Think about it, a movie you saw recently, or a TV show you're binging, or a book you're reading. I'm willing to bet that the plot essentially boils down to who's it about and what do they want. And once you know that as an audience, you're ready to sit back and say, okay, let's see if they get there. Off we go. Now, what happens next is crucial. On the way to the goal, there has to be some type of barrier or obstacle standing in their way. That's what creates drama, tension. You know, out here in Hollywood where I live, it's axiomatic among screenwriters and TV writers, no conflict, no story. And that barrier or obstacle, that creates conflict. It's that moment where the audience leans in and goes, oh, didn't see that coming, so then what'd she do? Let me invoke a higher authority here. You all know Aaron Sorkin from The West Wing and The Social Network, To Kill Mockingbird on stage, right? Take a look at what he says. You absolutely have to have obstacles or barriers in your story. So it makes it interesting and also reveals the character of the person who's dealing with those obstacles and the organization that they represent. And if you don't believe me or Aaron Sorkin, I'll invoke an even higher authority, evolution. We have evolved as a species, we Homo sapiens, to need this in our stories. I'll prove it to you. Let's do a short course in human history. Bear with me. Let's jump back in time 70,000 years, okay? It's 70,000 years ago today. It's a Wednesday. You see those two cave persons? You see that bush in the distance between and behind them? Well, 70,000 years ago today, they turned around and noticed that it was shaking. Well, that's unusual. There's no wind. There's no reason for it to be shaking, but it's shaking. The cave person on the left observes this unusual phenomenon, and he thinks this. The caveman on the right sees the very same thing, but he thinks this. And unmoved by this unusual event, the caveman on the right goes his merry way, whistling a merry tune. A saber-toothed tiger leaps out of the shaking bush and eats him alive. The caveman on the left, he survives. His DNA gets passed down. We are his descendants. Caveman on the right, not so much. So the point is, and it's a serious one, We human beings evolved to pay very close attention when something happens that we don't expect. And so when you are capturing a slice of life in a story, we don't have saber-toothed tigers jumping out of bushes anymore. You still need that shaking bush moment, something that makes the audience lean forward and say, oh, that's unusual. Didn't see that coming. You have my full attention. What happens next? And if we can surmount that barrier, well, that tells us something about our hero. She is brave or persistent. She invoked a partner. She put her head down and went right through it. Whatever, how they deal with those barriers tells us something, reveals character about the person or the organization they represent. And if there's another barrier and another after that, hey, the more the merrier. With every new barrier, a little more drama, a little more tension, a little more interest. What you have here in the middle with those three barriers, that's what we call the rising action of the story. And every barrier will reveal a little bit more about the people or the organization that they represent. Until they get past the last barrier and maybe they reach the goal. Maybe that's your ending. It's a success story. You know, we did good. Or maybe they don't. Maybe something else happens, but there's a clear resolution, something that tells the audience, this is what happened, and most importantly, this is what it means. This is why we took this journey. These are the 6 questions that your story has to answer if it's going to be effective. And let me show you another example. Surfers Healing is a nonprofit based in Southern California that works with children with autism and their families. In this 60-second PSA, they're going to tell their story. Now, some of you may have seen this before. This has aired for years on ESPN. Whether you've seen it before or not, I want you to watch it with new eyes. Because watch how in 60 seconds, it will touch all the bases, answering all 6 questions in order. Now, it doesn't do it explicitly. Those questions are not asked and answered explicitly, but they're there. So I want you to watch it closely, and then on the other side, we'll go over those questions, and you'll see what the answers are. So let's take a look at Surfers Healing.
My name is Izzy Paskowitz, and I've been running surf camps for autistic kids for 7 years. We get them down to the beach. The kids are going to scream. Some of the kids, they don't know how to speak. The only words that come out of their mouth is screaming. What's perfect for us to see that screaming and the kicking when they go out, and when they turn around and ride that wave in, it's just nothing like it. And there's the parents, tears in their eyes, saying, man, we've had a lot of tough times, but today was just a perfect day.
Isn't that well done? I think it's really beautifully done, but let's look at it more closely. So who would you say this 60-second story is about? Now, you might be tempted to say the children, because our hearts go to the kids first, right? But they're not our guide through the landscape of this story. They're not the first person we hear from. That would be Izzy Paskowitz. That's our narrator, happens to also be the founder of the organization. So he's the person we connect with first. And what does Izzy want? What are he and his colleagues trying to do on the beaches of Southern California? Well, we're not curing autism today, but we are taking these families that are facing a challenging series of days, and we just want to give them a great day. We just want to share the joy of surfing. That's enough, right? So that's the goal. Well, what stands in the way? What are the obstacles or barriers? Well, you saw it for yourself. The kids kicking and screaming on the beach, you saw that, right? They don't want to go. So that's a barrier. Well, how does Izzy and his colleagues respond to this barrier? How do they deal with this challenge? Well, they just take them. It's that classic parenting principle known as we're going, right? Because I said so. And what happens in the end? Well, you saw it for yourself. They go out looking a little nervous. They come back with big smiles. Everyone has a great time. And the meaning? Well, you could give several different meanings to this story depending on where you're coming from. But hey, it's ESPN that's running the PSA, so what meaning do they give it? There's more to sports than just scores, that a sport, in this case, the sport of surfing, can have a higher value. But these are the questions that your stories need to answer. So when you think about the stories you're telling now, ask yourself, is it clear who it's about, whom I'm asking my audience to identify? Do I understand very clearly from the start what they want? Do I see what they're up against that's going to make it interesting? Do I see how they handle those challenges and what it says about them or our organization? Is it clear what happens in the end and also what it means? If you can answer all those questions, chances are you're on your way to a memorable and persuasive story. So before we get to our last section about the kinds of stories you should tell, I want to bring back Connie and ask her, Connie, any questions about either of the first two sections so far?
We have a few questions for you, Andy. The first one would be, are there keywords or phrases that you recommend using when storytelling to increase your listeners' engagement?
Well, there is actually an exercise where I've seen this done where to help people tell a story, like I don't know where to start, they give them 7 phrases to start with to remind them to answer all these questions. The first phrase they give them is once upon a time. Now, you might say, well, okay, now we're like doing fairy tales, right? But what once upon a time reminds you to do is to give the story a starting point. You know, where are we? When are we? If you're going to tell a story to somebody, you want to fix it in time and space. You know, we're in Baltimore last week. We're in Los Angeles today. We're in St. Louis 10 years ago. So once upon a time. And then the next phrase is, and every day, what was the pattern? What was happening that's just normal life? What's the world in balance? Until one day, what happens that gets the story going? So those are some of the phrases. There are 7 of them, and if I can remember, I'll provide them to BMS at the end so they can email them out to you. But those are some of the key phrases that tell the listener, here's where we're starting, you know, here's what the world is like, here's where it's going, and here's where it gets interesting.
Very good. The next question is there an ideal length for a story?
You know, I have to give you the all-purpose, never satisfying answer. It depends. Because if you're a good storyteller, you know, 3, 4, 5 minutes, you can keep them wrapped. If you're a bad storyteller, 30 seconds is too long, right? But if you want kind of a sweet spot, my experience working with people, somewhere between 2 and 3 minutes tends to be the sweet spot. And I'm not sure why that is. I'm not sure if that's what we're acculturated to, because that's how long news stories tend to run, or that's how long commercial segments are, or whatever it is. But most stories between 2 and 3 minutes tends to be about the right amount of length for people to stay dialed in and not be, you know, tapping their watch.
Okay, and we have one more. Often when we're telling stories about people facing the deadliest cancers, as an example, pancreatic cancer, the barrier can seem insurmountable, and we may be calling on other players in the system to respond, health services, governments, etc. Can you still tell an effective story when your obstacle seems insurmountable?
Absolutely. You know, not every story has a happy ending, and not every story is about conquering the disease or the problem. Sometimes stories are about progress, you know, the progress we're making and where we hope to go from here with your help. Sometimes the stories have a sad ending where, you know, we meet someone who has gotten pancreatic cancer and perhaps they don't survive, but their life is a reminder to, you know, their life and their passing is a reminder to us of the work still to be done. So you're using the power of narrative to pull people in, to engage them, to make them feel something, to deliver your message, in these cases, maybe about the work still to be done. Thank you, Connie. Let's move on to our last section. Let's talk about the kinds of stories that you should tell. And really, it sort of boils down to one thing, and that's that we want you to be able to tell stories that people will remember and care about and be moved to action, moved to change the way they think and behave. And I want to show you one classic case study that does this. This was done at the University of Southern California a few years ago. At the it was a project of both the Annenberg School of Communications and the Keck School of Medicine, and it was called Transforming Cancer Knowledge, Attitudes, and Behavior Through Narrative. Yes, very memorable title. But what it was really all about, the title I would give it would be a question: can storytelling help us protect more Mexican American women from from cervical cancer. That's what it was really all about. So let me tell you what they did. But actually, before I do, a little bit of background. I want to talk to you about cervical cancer. And I'm guessing in this audience, there are people who know a lot more about it than me, but just some basic facts, so we're all on the same grounds here. As you probably know, cervical cancer is highly preventable through Pap tests and the human papillomavirus vaccination. So it can be prevented. That said, 250,000 women annually die worldwide still, even though this is a highly preventable disease. And Mexican-American women in the U.S. are particularly at risk due to certain cultural mores and values where the protection that they need is available, but they don't access it. Now, the information they need is accessible. The reason I have the CDC guide on here is you can get this thing for free. Just send away and they'll send it to you. But if you look through it, not the most reader-friendly publication you've ever seen. So maybe there's a better way to reach people with information that will protect them. That's what this study was all about. So here's what they did. They assembled 3 cohorts of women. As you can see, 236 African-American women, 268 European-American women, which means predominantly white, and 254 Mexican-American women. Now, all 3 groups are important, but it's the Mexican-American women that we're most interested in. So the other 2 groups are more or less like controls. The Mexican-American group is the group we want to focus on. Now, all 3 cohorts were divided in half. But let's take those 254 Mexican-American women. Let's divide them into 2 groups. One group, we're going to show them a short video called It's Time. It's 10 minutes long. As you see, it's non-narrative, which means it's kind of like the science film you would have seen like in high school or college. It has talking heads, doctors, nurses, researchers, patients talking about cervical cancer. And it contains 10 key facts about the disease, how you can protect yourself against it, etc. So half of the women in the Mexican-American group saw this video. The other half saw another 10-minute video called The Tamale Lesson. This was just a 10-minute story about the Romero family celebrating the daughter's quinceanera. The women are in the kitchen making tamales, and very naturally, the conversation turns to cervical cancer. Don't ask me, it just does. But this 10-minute story contains the same 10 key facts about cervical cancer that's in It's Time. And so the question is, we're going to show these 2 videos to these 2 different groups, and when it's all over, will more women in one group schedule a Pap test as a result of seeing their video than in the other group? Is one way better than the other to motivate people to act in their own protection? Well, I want you to have more of a sense of these 2 videos. So while It's Time runs 10 minutes, I want to show you just a 2-minute clip that gives you a little flavor of what it's like. I will warn you in advance, we're going to see the beginning of a Pap test. So if anybody's squeamish, prepare yourself. I think we're all adults here. But let's sit back and watch 2 minutes of It's Time.
The doctor told me that because I was sexually active that I should get a Pap test, so I did.
You start reading about facts about who's at more risk of getting it. And
I didn't know that older women were more susceptible to having cervical cancer.
Worldwide, cervical cancer is the 3rd most common cancer found in women. The cervix is the bottom portion of the uterus, or the neck of the uterus, that have been infected with the human papillomavirus, or more known as HPV. This virus can then cause the cells to grow abnormally, progressively change into cancer, to the extent of then leaving the cervix and it affecting other parts of the body. HPV is transmitted from person to person through sexual contact. Then at least 50% of women have been infected with HPV by the time they are menopausal.
I haven't taken the Pap test because I don't have the time or the money. Well, a lot of women would say, it costs too much money.
There's a free program that you can qualify for if you don't have health insurance.
I found a free clinic where I live, and they said, oh, no, don't worry about it. Everything's free.
Women are so stressed out and deal with so many things that a lot of our body takes so much, and that's why we have to go check ourselves. Everybody gets embarrassed, and just get over the embarrassment.
How you doing? I'm Dr. Aguilar. This is Alba.
Hello. Hi.
We're here to do your pap test today.
Having it the first time, it's something, you feel uncomfortable because you think somebody's going to be looking down there.
So we'll just do that quickly. Lay down for me. All right, then we. All right. All right.
Okay, so that's a little sampling of its time, and as you can see, a very traditional, conventional approach to disseminating information to protect public health. The tamale lesson is going to be very different. As I said, this is a 10-minute video. It tells a story with characters interacting with each other, but it will get out the same facts. And we'll watch about a 2.5-minute clip here, so you can again get a flavor of the difference between the two. No pap test in this one, but I will warn you, you'll never look at chicken the same way again. Let's take a look.
Have you ever had a pap test?
No, I told you I'm a virgin.
Okay, it's true. You mainly get HPV from sex. But so what? You're 21 and you should get yourself checked out anyway.
Checked out for what?
A pap test? What's a pap test?
Nothing.
Hey, I gotta know things too. I'm about to be a woman.
You're about to be 15, not quite a woman.
Petra got married when she was 15.
And I was too young.
Why don't you go try on your dress?
Why are you going to have a pap test?
Pap test?
That's what they're talking about while they're making tamales. Can you believe this?
Well, every woman should know about pap tests.
Why are you perverting your sister? She doesn't need to know about those things.
Yes, she does. Do you want her to get cancer?
Who's talking about cancer?
You can get cancer down there.
Yes, but Connie's not like you. She's a virgin.
Pap tests are not just for women who have sex.
Ay.
Do you know women from 21 to 60, they should get checked at least every 2 years. And if you're sexually active, you should get checked more often. I heard 50% of the women have this virus.
That many?
Yes, and if you don't get checked, you can get cervical cancer and it can spread all over your body and you could die. You should get yourself checked, Petra.
My husband is dead. Why would I need a pap test?
Who has the time or the money?
It's not that expensive. It's an easy checkup. Plus, I hear women your age.
I ain't that old.
I'm just saying, you're on the higher risk. Plus, it's very easy. You don't even have to go to a hospital. You can go to the clinic on Central, and it's free.
Does it hurt?
No, not really. Just like a mosquito bite like this.
Ow.
It's embarrassing.
And it's probably uncomfortable.
No, it's more like this. Okay, when you go to the doctor, you sit on the table, and they spread your legs like this.
Stop. And what exactly does the doctor do?
Okay, so let's pretend this is your vagina.
It's not that color.
Petra, just pretend.
Okay, I'm a tamal.
So the doctor has like this device, this metal device. They just spread the walls of your vagina.
I don't say words like that.
Petra, you've never had this test done before? It's not as bad as it looks. Mira. They take this mascara type wand and then they just swab you on the inside like that.
Yeah, they take a little sample of your cells.
Okay, so you just had a little flavor of the tamale lesson. No pun intended. So, what are the results? So, after the test, the women came back together and had an opportunity to. After the videos, they had an opportunity to come back together and schedule a pap test. In the group of African American women that was split in half, 57% who saw the non-narrative video, It's Time, went ahead and scheduled a pap test. Those who saw the tamale lesson, 64% went, so 7% difference there. So that's good. The European American women, there was a 5% difference in favor of the tamale lesson, the story. But in the group that we really are most interested in, the group that the video was obviously geared to, both in terms of the casting and the cultural references and everything about it, there was a 14% difference. If you know anything about these kinds of experiments, that is a very significant difference. And just think about that worldwide. If we were actually able to save 14% of the 250,000 women every year who are passing away because they're not getting the help that they need, that's literally saving thousands of lives, because instead of putting out information in a traditional and conventional way, we're telling stories. So with that, I want to throw it open one more time for any questions or comments about anything we talked about today, either the power of storytelling, how to tell a good story, or the kinds of stories you could tell. I'll bring Connie back for that. And then we have a little bit of housekeeping, and I have one last thought to share with you. But Connie, any final questions in the chat box?
Yeah, we have a few for you. The first one would be, in this current situation of the pandemic where we're in a virtual world, do you have any special tips or suggestions for how to tell stories in this current situation?
You know, in a sense, nothing has changed in that, you know, human beings love stories. That hasn't changed. And if we're communicating online as opposed to face-to-face, stories are still a very valuable tool. So I would encourage you to use stories in your communications, whether you're doing webinars or web meetings or webcasts or whatever you call them. Find time for stories, because it's the thing that when people hear, that's when they start to lean in. And I will say this, one of the greatest challenges in online communications like this is engagement. You know, people are home. The distraction level is high. The tendency to multitask is huge. So you got to use every tool in your arsenal to keep them engaged. And frankly, I don't think you've got a better tool than a good story.
Right. One final question is, with so much going on right now with the pandemic, as well as so many other topics that distract people, is there anything you can recommend to make your story more impactful and get your share of voice out there when there may be other stories that are pulling people away?
Well, yeah, and I've given this some more thought. You know, the reason sometimes I think stories fall flat is because we sort of lapse into cliche. You know, one of the great mistakes that I see, particularly in the public interest sector with storytelling, is what we call sort of the broken person model of storytelling. There's a person with a problem, they encounter our organization and our good works, they're fixed, and they come out the other side with a better life. And when people hear stories that fall into that pattern, their eyes start to glaze over. It's like, I've heard that story a million times. So I challenge you to tell stories that avoid cliche, that avoid the broken person model, that show the agency of the people that you're working with and trying to help. What do they bring to the party, you know, when you're working together? And just avoid cliches where you can. Truly authentic stories, stories that have things that we never see coming, that don't feel at all familiar, that's what cuts through. So I urge you to sort of keep working on your stories until it feels fresh and dynamic and authentic and not like something you've heard a million times.
Thanks, Andy. That's all our questions.
Well, thank you. And a little bit of housekeeping, and then I have one last thought to share with you all. If you found today interesting and you want to stay in touch, we do a monthly newsletter called Free Range Thinking, which is only about best practices in communications in the public interest arena, in which I think we all work. So if you want to sign up for it, go to our website, thegoodmancenter.com, give us your email address. We'll send it to you once a month. No cost, charge, or obligation, as they say on TV. And we won't do anything else with your email address. No spam, nothing. There's also a couple of books on our website under the resources section, which are free. These were underwritten by foundations, so we are happy to give them away. Why Bad Ads Happen to Good Causes, as Connie mentioned at the very beginning, a study of nonprofit and public interest print advertising and why, sadly, a lot of it doesn't work. And then the stunning sequel, Why Bad Presentations Happen to Good Causes, why so many good-intentioned people get up there in front of the room with some PowerPoint over their shoulder and slowly put people to sleep. How do you avoid that? Both books can be downloaded for free. And in between books, if I see something more immediate, watch this TV show tonight, check out this website, read this article. I'll tweet under the name Goodman Center. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, @Goodman Center. I want to say a big thank you to Connie and everybody at Bristol Myers Squibb. I would not be here without you. So thank you for this opportunity to talk to you all today. And here's the last thought I want to leave you with. Earlier I talked about how stories help us remember and how they can change the way we think and behave. But maybe the most important quality of stories is how stories connect us. And the last time I was strongly reminded of this was in the aftermath of 9/11. Take a moment and think back for yourself what it was like for you in the first days and weeks and months after that, horrific day. If your life was anything like mine, when I would pass complete strangers on the street, get into an elevator with people, and and we would catch eyes, it's like I knew what they were thinking, right? I knew what they were feeling. I felt more strongly connected to everyone than I had in a long time. And I think that's because for a time there, we were all in the same story. And then that fades. And then there was this day, a couple of days back in early March, do you remember when it seemed like almost overnight, it went from, hey, this could be a problem, to everybody's got to stay home, everything's shut down, and we're into the pandemic. And, I had the same experience again of walking on the street and passing people, except this time I'm wearing a mask and they're wearing a mask, and all we can see are each other's eyes. But in their eyes, I could see the same thing and the same feeling. And I felt this profound sense of connection again. We're all in the same story. And this was happening all over the country. I'm sure it's happening where you are. It's why we saw scenes in New York City and are still seeing them every night at 7 o'clock like this. Feeling like you're in the same story with everyone else, it's powerful, but it's also fragile. Look how quickly we start to divide into other stories. It can come apart so easily. So at the end of the day, that's why I believe you have to tell stories. Stories are the threads that hold us together. As we've seen crises come along, and they'll weave those threads for us. But we don't have to wait for events to come along and do it for us. We can and should be doing it ourselves all the time. Telling stories that make people understand we are all together in this. So I urge you, I implore you, go out and tell your stories. Because if you will do that, then for right now, for today, we can close the curtain on this story, but it's definitely not the end. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Andy, for that inspiring presentation. I think you gave us some very wonderful tools in order to tell our stories. A reminder to everyone, we'll be sharing a link to the recording of this presentation for your future viewing, and the portal that you're using to see this presentation will be open so you can check out other videos and materials like the ASCO message from Giovanni Caporio and some other messages from our senior leaders and our IOTeach tools. So please take a look around. Also, please do give us your ideas and feedback about this presentation in the survey that you will receive as a follow-up. Now I would like to introduce Joseph Eid, Senior Vice President and Head of Global Medical, to provide some closing comments. Joe?
Thank you, Mark, Kathy, and Connie, for inviting me to join this special virtual edition of our annual ASCO Advocacy Group. As the world's largest biopharmaceutical cancer care company, Bristol Myers Squibb holds its responsibility to patients in the highest regard. Our presence at this year's ASCO meeting underscores the science-driven approach of our clinical development in cancer research, as well as our dedication to precision medicine and our commitment to helping to deliver durable improvement in patients' outcomes. We are proud of our transformative work in hematology and immuno-oncology that has changed the survival curve and gave hope to many cancer patients. But we know that there is still much more to do. Our researchers are working tirelessly to advance a deep and diverse pipeline across multiple platforms targeting different cancers. In the field of immune cell therapy, this includes registrational chimeric antigen receptor, or CAR T-cell agents, for numerous cancers, and a growing early-stage pipeline that expands cell and gene therapy targets and technologies. We are developing cancer treatments directed at key biological pathways using our protein homeostasis platform, which forms the basis of our existing therapies for multiple myeloma and several promising compounds in early to mid-stage development. Our scientists are targeting different immune system pathways to address interactions between tumors, the microenvironment, and the immune system to further expand the progress and help more patients respond to treatment. The innovation behind these transformational medicines is developed internally and through collaboration with academia, government, biotech companies, and advocacy groups like yours. At BMS, we also embrace change, especially to benefit patients. The virtual setting for our advocacy forum this year reflects the impact of COVID-19. We are committed to supporting patients with cancer and overcoming the challenge that many patients, physicians, and research community are facing during this time. Adam and Winslow already shared with you one of the ways BMS is doing this through the launch of the COVID Advocacy Exchange. Weaving the patient perspective into the development and commercialization of medicines is mission critical to us at BMS. For the past year, we have been working closely with expert patient advocates to define and implement an innovative new process spanning all markets and therapeutic areas at BMS. I am proud to tell you a little bit about the resulting initiative, aptly named Patient Expert Engagement Resource, or PEER. The PEER initiative ensures that the patient perspective is heard and considered at every step of clinical development and beyond. Let's take a look at a short video about the program.
There's a popular saying among patients when it comes to drug discovery and development, and that is, no research about us without us. Patients feel good knowing they're leaving a mark to help others.
Patients are the customer. They are the recipients of your therapies and trials, which should be for them, by them, and about them. They feel empowered when asked to participate.
It is essential for the industry to see beyond just clinical data to explore the true impact medications have.
When the patient voice is included in the design and development of new drugs, the patient feels valued.
I'm really excited about the PEER initiative. I think it's a great opportunity to make sure that we continue to bring the voice of the patient in everything we do.
It is important to get the perspective of the patient that is going to be taking that medicine. Those are important understandings and insights that truly impact our mission of discovering, developing, and delivering medicines to patients.
My team will be working hard to make sure those perspectives are added to everything that we do to make the voice of the patient stronger.
It's essential that we hear directly from the people who know what it's like to live with the disease. Their feedback can make a huge difference.
Because at the end of the day, it's all about the patients we serve.
We are very excited about bringing the patient voice into our end-to-end process through this unique program, and we are moving forward quickly. a major action we've already implemented through the PEER program requires that all pivotal trial protocols include expert patient advocate involvement before any final sign-off approvals are granted. The launch of PEER ensures that insights drawn from the voices of our patients are heard as we develop protocols for clinical studies. As the video clearly showed, our goal is to fuel research that is designed by patients for patients. I truly believe this will make an enormous difference in the lives of the patients participating in clinical trials and beyond. PEER will help us better understand the impact our studies have on the lives of the patients, the overall healthcare infrastructure, and critical elements such as inclusion and exclusion criteria, schedule of events, and study design. Gathering insights directly from those affected by cancer we are studying is not just important, it's essential to BMS's vision of transforming patients' lives through science. I know many of you attending this virtual forum have helped us formulate the PEER initiative. I take this opportunity to thank you for your time, commitment, and collaboration with Bristol Myers Squibb, and especially for advocating for patients. We look forward to working with all of you and together helping patients prevail against serious diseases.
Thank you, Joe, for those wonderful closing comments. Before we go, I'd like to update a little bit on the BMS Foundation Food Assistance Program. As many of you are aware, the BMS Foundation is partnered with Team Rubicon and PAF to launch the COVID-19 Emergency Food Assistance Program for immunocompromised patients to provide access to complimentary food delivery and patients' one-time grant of $500. The program was launched May 8th, and we've been thrilled by the ability to reach over 2,500 patients so far. There is still funding and resource capability available, and the teams have been diligently working to ensure no one gets left behind in this time of need. If any of your patients have applied for financial assistance through the program and have not yet received information regarding payment, please encourage them to resubmit their application. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact Catherine Grimes or myself with any questions. And with that, I'd like to just thank you all for giving us your time and attention today. We hope that you enjoyed our presentation, and we do hope that you will take some time to look at the other materials that we have provided on the portal. And please do send us your thoughts about this virtual forum. We'd love to hear what you think. And with that, I would say, please stay safe, stay well, and I look forward to seeing you soon.